Welcome back to Windows on the World. This is part 2 of the first part of the show, which was part 1. We're back with Sandy Adams and Piers Corbyn. Now, in the first part of the show, we talked about the state of British politics, the state of the mindset in the UK, and we also looked at a rather ridiculous article, but not ridiculous by the standards of the newspaper that printed it, which was entitled "Why Climate Action is the Antithesis of White Supremacy." Now go back and listen to that show, because you will not find anything more ludicrous anywhere in any printed media than this nonsense that was put into The Guardian. And we did quite a good analysis in the first part of the show. But basically, we also talked about how this fake environmentalism, like Extinction Rebellion, and indeed the fake climate change stories that are put into The Guardian, fake in the respect that they are just opinions and beliefs, not based on any fact at all, with no analysis, how they are all linked in to the first global revolution, the Club of Rome's 1991 book, where they stated that in searching for a common enemy against whom we can unite, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. In their totality and their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat which must be confronted by everyone together. Thus, the club itself takes credit for coming up with the global warming mantra in order to drive global adoption of sustainable development, which is Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, which is what we talk about in our talks, the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is what the mainstream repeaters do not have. So it's essential to be armed with this kind of information. I'm going to be joined now by Sandy Adams, who's one of the speakers of The Bigger Picture, which can be booked by yourself and at a venue of your choice in your town, your village or your city. And it's very informative. It lasts all day, well, from 12 till 6 p.m. We're also going to advertise our show in Llandilo, which is in Wales. Have a look at windowsontheworld.net on the front page, and you will see all the details to that, which is our series of talks in Wales in Llandilo, and all the details are on the website. It's £10 for the entire day, and you will meet there very interesting, like-minded people, probably have a good time as well, which is actually what it's all about. Bringing people together in their local area to talk about things which are important to everybody. So I'm going to welcome Sandy and get her reactions to this propagandized piece that was put out in The Guardian, which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. It was titled "Why Climate Action is the Antithesis of White Supremacy." So, Sandy, are you there?
I am indeed. Can you hear me okay?
I think we can hear you fine.
Clear.
Yes,
Okay,
I mean,
good.
you've read that
Lovely.
article and you've looked into the person who wrote that article since we put out the first part of the show. Now, what strikes you when you read something as absurd as that? In actual fact, the article is about basically comparing people who believe in man-made global warming to some interconnected special type of people who are the antithesis of racists. And the whole premise is not only absurd, but in fact deranged. I mean, what did you actually make of it when you read it?
Well, like you, I mean, clearly, it is a deranged, piece of writing, because I found it quite schizophrenic in lots of ways, a bit sort of almost, I don't know. Just the thing is that it is clearly a piece of propaganda to push forward, in my opinion, the Green New Deal, which they're trying to. The Green New Deal is interesting because it's another incarnation of sustainable development, because it's a rebranding of it, if you like, because we've had various brands of Agenda 21. First of all, it was Agenda 21, and then it turned into they call it smart growth. They called it the Millennium Project. They called it many, many things, because the minute it's called out for what it really is, they rebrand it. And its latest incarnation is the Green New Deal, as we know, which is, as our peers I'm sure know, that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the darling of the Green New Deal, is calling for basically a zero national greenhouse gas emissions. The closing down of every power plant on the planet.
Well, this is basically mass extinction. And it was Patrick Moore, the co-founder of Greenpeace, who actually brought this up and said, well, what you're actually asking for is annihilation of everyone on the planet, because carbon neutral means that nobody's going to be able to keep warm. And as we know, the problem with the so-called green energy agenda is it's not efficient and doesn't really work. A bit like the Green New Deal. Now, the fact that they have to get this glove puppet, this Cortez woman, what's her name? I can't remember.
Oh, her name's Alexandria.
Yes, I've been in different countries over the past couple of months, and I'd kind of let her slip from my mind, but I do see the odd posting about her, and one of the best postings was, yay, great news, my IQ test came back negative. I thought that was quite good, yes.
Well, she's actually, I mean, the thing is that I do think I can't believe that they got somebody, I can believe it because she's a useful idiot. She has not a clue about, I mean, the whole thing about, I mean, even in that article, they said, climate change is science, it's like, the thing is that A-level science, as you know that CO2 is actually gas of life, that's what creates life on our planet.
Even in O-level science, actually.
In O-level, not even A-level. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's almost as though we've got amnesia about, or maybe people aren't being taught. We've got amnesia about our history for one thing, and we've got amnesia about basic, science of climate. And this is a real problem. It's a real problem because actually I did look at another article that woman had written, the woman that wrote...
Rebecca Solnit.
That's it, Rebecca. And she was talking how, in her lifetime, she's seen the collapse of communism, and I've seen the Berlin Wall come down, and I've seen the whole USSR, become not, to defeat communism. But what they're not seeing, is actually the history repeating itself right now.
Yes, but they used to call it communism, you see, but now it's totalitarianism. So she probably thinks that's a good thing, you see.
Exactly. But I mean, the fact is that 100% renewable energy defies the laws of physics. It's impossible to achieve. As and I'm sure Piers will have a lot to say about that as well, because despite all the subsidies, the clean energy and wind power and everything, it only provides about 6% of the nation's energy, and solar probably 1%. So if the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, you need the rest of the grid is shored up by nuclear power and other fossil fuels. And the thing is that who's going to take responsibility if they shut everything down? Destroying also a lot of jobs, and then they close every power point on the planet, and they create economic chaos at the end of the day. It would end up with costing the economy of all our countries trillions of pounds, dollars, whatever, because they want this by 2040, and it's just a nonsense, really. It would just destroy economies all over the world and be impossible to achieve. So I don't know. It's I just feel that it's just an agenda that's being pushed simply to create the chaos that is required.
Well, yes, that's absolutely it. And that is the solution. It's the antithesis to the thesis, what we talk about,
exactly.
That basically all this stuff is scientifically worked out. We've gone through this on so many previous shows. It's always good to try and come at it from different angles. I mean, that's why that article particularly stood out, because it went way beyond anything I've ever seen. And it made me realize that these people who are pushing this on their extreme end, the fringes of them, like this person who's basically a lobbyist for the World Bank. That's what she is. If you look at that website, basically the actual extreme nature of these pieces, when you read them in newspapers like The Guardian, it's kind of unbelievable. And that's my point, that it's beyond any kind of reason. There's no reasoning necessary anymore. So these people are basically unhinged, and they are as dangerous as any murderous regime of the past or the distant past. So when an ideology like this takes hold, these people lose reason, and when you lose reason, then you only have ideology, and these people are brainwashed into something which is actually going to destroy everything, and it's for a good reason, according to the Global Action Plan, you see. But the thing is that was the whole point in the first part of the show, is that these puppets, they're not intelligent, they're actually stupid. Most of them are careerists, and it doesn't matter whether it's in politics and what's happening in the Labour Party, or whether it's these climate extremists. The narcissism that's attached to their actions is paramount, and that's the main point. Once you take that away and you decode what they are, there's nothing happening. And what it is, it's this cult of mediocrity. Like, there's nobody who gets up there who's actually charismatic and got anything to say. None of them, when it comes down to it, have anything to say. They just push these sound bites.
Well, they're completely unfunny, aren't they?
And they can't argue. I was just saying, like the dish mop, Jess Phillips, saying she'd make a really good prime minister, and that's according to her. I mean, the thing is that isn't it up to other people to say that? Saying, "Oh, Piers, you'd make a really good prime minister." Not you turning around and saying, "I think I'd make a really good prime minister." Now, in a moment of kind of irony or self-aggrandizement, you could actually sort of forgive that, because people say, "Well, I'd make a good prime minister," because actually looking at who is the prime minister, they probably would. I mean, if you look at Theresa May, I mean, she'd be out of her depth at a Women's Institute meeting, but the public actually think, because she gets up and lies convincingly and tries to look stern and authoritative, that she actually is when she isn't.
Yeah. But I think going back to this green agenda, I mean, it's beyond beggars' belief that it's ever launched by any political operation as something real. Because look around your room now, and I'm looking around this room now, there's a large amount of metal and plastic. Now, the metal requires blast furnaces. You can't run blast furnaces with wind farms, or solar power. It's a nonsense. The plastic, of course, comes from oil, and plastic bags come from oil. All of those things would go under their agenda. Now, that would leave this room here pretty completely bare. There'd be a wooden table here, but there was a metal saw used to make the wooden table. Yeah, you know what I mean? That it's complete, utter nonsense that they're putting forward. I can't believe that they believe it themselves, or if they do, they are seriously
I think they do believe
mentally deficient.
I think a lot of them do believe it.
They're actually clinically mad then.
Well, you can say that.
The thing is, they don't think. They're not actually thinking.
They don't connect.
I mean, that's the worrying thing, is that they
don't see the interconnectedness.
They're all quoting sound bites.
Yeah.
And none of them are thinking and actually doing any research into what is really happening with the climate. And if they did, they wouldn't be spouting this nonsense unless they're paid to do it. Basically, at the end of the day, it's a plan to nationalise our entire energy industry, and have the state take over, private companies, and I think that's more of what it's all about, and people being paid to push this agenda is that at the end of the day, it's propaganda to push this through. But if people could
But I don't think it's about nationalisation, because the Wall Street corporations like this stuff because it's part of destabilisation, I think. And
well, I don't know, because I mean, the Federal Reserve have got their teeth into this as well. So I don't know. It's still very confusing as to who the stakeholders are and who what is really going on. But all we know is
justified taxation. I think. Carbon taxation.
All I know is that they want to kind of. Not content with destroying the existing sort of energy resources as the plan requires. It also wants to upgrade every residential and industrial building to renewable energy. Well, that's going to cost a fortune, isn't it?
No, it's about impoverishing everybody who may have a little money left, who's not part of the elite, who cannot actually get it out of the country and into the Cayman Islands and all the rest of it. I mean, it's quite simple, really, because if you're talking about really big business, then that's the way you'd think. You have to put yourself into the mindset of the people who are actually controlling this, because it's so tempting for them, because I think it's beyond even control to the people that you might call globalists. I mean, their financial interests are paramount, so they're business people, and once you get something that's a business plan, it's going to attract people who want to invest and basically who want to keep control of their elite status. I mean, that sounds a little bit naive, but at the top end, that's what it's about. It's about money. It's a business, and the Global Action Plan is a business.
I think if you look at the actual practicalities of these green policies, you can see how it does fit in to the banks and the IMF and so forth. For example, you see, take the electric cars, right? They get massive subsidies. They're completely stupid because they produce twice as much CO2 per mile as an ordinary car, and they use huge resources in terms of metals. But they're put forward as green. Now, they're actually not green. They're fake green. They're just fashion statements, actually. So that's one thing. But again, big investors like it because they get subsidies. Another one, like Drax Power Station, running it on wood chips, massive transport across America, across the Atlantic, destroying American forests in order to burn them in Drax Power Station in England, and so forth. Again, big costs and requiring corporate activity and government backup. The Amazon Basin. They want to dam the Amazon Basin to make more hydropower. Well, this is a huge, huge project, completely stupid, very costly way of producing this electricity, will destroy life there and the tribes there. But, the corporations who are going to do this, of course, this is fantastic. So it's, if you like, the Green Deal is a bit like the arms deal. You just receive government money, they print government money to do it, and all those involved get well off, and those, like the rest of us, essentially pay taxes or got inflation because of the money they print to do this stuff. So you can see how it actually works, but the insanity of it is beyond belief.
I mean, it's just kind of, it's like it's really they're doing it through this whole grant system, which is exactly how sustainable development works. It's right. Basically you get all the grant money in, and then you can then dictate as to what how it's going, what the outcome is going to be. So it's kind of oligarchy, really, isn't it?
So fake green policies are basically run by grants and subsidies from the rest of us. And I think listeners should challenge any green person who comes up to them and says, look, what you're saying is fake green. The only true green policies, actually maybe defend a piece of woodland near you, that sort of stuff is true green. Look after the sparrows in the hedgerows. They're fantastic. It should be done. But of course,
exactly.
This is not
what
they're
about.
What
we all remember as green. But unfortunately, it's been so infiltrated now by this by sustainable development, by whatever you want to call it, Agenda 21, which is in every town council now in the world. Well, in England particularly, and in every state in America and every other country that's signed up to Agenda 21 at the Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio. But we've got all this happening, all this is rolling out, but they're not achieving their goals. And I'm wondering if this Green New Deal, this is why we're seeing so much in our media, and it's being pushed to the hilt at the moment. I don't know whether, I'm sure you've noticed this, Mark, even though you've been away, that in every single article in The Guardian every day, it's climate.
Oh, yes, they have
climate.
one every day. They have a dedicated article
Absolutely.
on climate change, which is basically an opinion piece based on fantasy. And that's actually the truth. They are opinion pieces based on a fantasy and a belief of the writer in what they've been told. And none of them can come up with anything where they back up what they're saying. They don't justify what they're doing. So in other words, there is no journalism. These people are just spouting propaganda that's been implanted into them.
And you see, the thing is that we had the Earth Summit in 1992. I mean, prior to that, I think it was just an idea when Gro Harlem Brundtland and Maurice Strong got together in the United Nations and brought out Our Common Future, which was it was a Club of Rome report, much like the Global Revolution, about sort of basically sort of equality for all, and it all sounded very worthy. But the fact is, it was a seed for Agenda 21, because actually what they really wanted was global control. And so, we had that in 1992, and they gave themselves 7 years to achieve Agenda 21. And of course, that didn't happen. So then they turned it into sustainable development and the Millennium Project, which was supposed to have happened by 2000. They missed that goal. And then they brought in Agenda 2030 in 2015. They were supposed in 2000. The Millennium Project was supposed to have taken to 2015. Well, that goal was missed. So then from 2015 to 2030, they got Agenda 2030, which was supposed to have another set of goals, but they'd expanded it into 17 goals by then. And then now we've suddenly got the Green New Deal. They've just brought that, foisted that on everyone. And I see it as panic, actually. I see it as almost just not being able to fulfill those goals. I do wonder whether this whole 5G thing is to just push everything forward a little bit, because it's that again is another thing that is making people wake up to what the fake green is doing, because actually they're chopping down trees and they're
for 5G they chop down trees, big time.
All the trees, because the 5G signal can't get through the trees, particularly when they're wet. They're chopping them all down.
Line of sight, doesn't it?
Well, also for the houses, what you're seeing now is articles where trees are being covered in nets to stop birds nesting there. And people go, why are you stopping the birds nesting in the trees? Well, basically, we can't cut the trees down when there's birds in them. So we're going to be sustainable, and we're going to stop the birds going in the trees. Then we can knock the trees down, because that's sustainability, isn't it?
You couldn't make it up.
When you've got a green, the green movement supporting 5G, because they want the smart cities, because they want to save the planet, and yet they're cutting all the trees down. These are the lungs of London.
Yes, well, this is this Gail Bradbrook, who's basically the head honcho at Extinction Rebellion, the entitled scroungers cult of people who think lying in the road, throwing fake blood around and gluing themselves to doors is going to change.
On the road?
Well, it's not going to change the weather, Piers. That's the problem.
It'll make you wet, though, won't it? Well, actually, I think there's allegedly on Twitter, there's some sort of split going on in the European Union now about their obsession with climate change, because, there are still some industries left in Europe, despite their efforts to destroy them, mostly being removed from Britain. But, for them, this climate change agenda is complete nonsense, and it is being revealed as such. And I think we have to counter their stuff a bit more clearly. We should counter this green nonsense with electricity for all at cost. That should be our demand for power. And, the smoke from electricity can be removed in power stations, but electricity for all at cost, not these stupid, unnecessary expenses for electricity, and just like housing for all at cost. To cut out the banking hedge fund theft which is going on the back of these policies.
Well, that's the Global Action Plan, you see. That's the whole point.
We need our own global action plan.
Well, yes.
Electricity for all, Mr. Windows.
Well, the whole point is to create artificial scarcity because that's where the money is, you see. So you create a housing crisis and then you can inflate the prices through the roof. Then you can put the interest rates up, claim back all the property, sell it off because that's a real asset, not money that's printed out of thin air. And then the same thing with the climate change agenda. Yes, I mean, basically the thing about it is to create the artificial scarcity so that the future will be power cuts, as the leading suppliers of energy to the national grid told us at the energy conference we attended. Have a look at the Green Energy Agenda on YouTube, or preferably on some other platform such as BitChute. I'm not sure whether that one's on BitChute, but it's definitely on YouTube. And it's the suppliers to the national grid, when the national grid is at peak, which is very often, these guys are saying that we supply energy from diesel generators at top prices to the government, and that is their idea of green energy, because there isn't green energy. That's the whole point. So the whole thing's a facade, and basically very cleverly socially engineered. So you've now got the Stasi idea of children basically bullying their parents, and the children are going to be saying, don't take us to school in the car. For instance, you've got the Save Our Streets, or whatever it's called. I'm going to do a show on this. The Useful Idiot in Walthamstow implementing sustainable development, whose name I shouldn't mention, Clyde Lokes. Although we usually use his name as, well, he's basically the change agent of change agents. He's the creme de la creme of useful idiots.
Oh, okay.
And basically, they started out, all the change agents got together and they said, what a great idea. We're going to stop cars stopping outside our school. Oh, there's too many unnecessary journeys. They basically have a few little sound bites which they all use. And once you get the hang of how this works, it's so ridiculously simple, you will wonder why you never saw through it before. And that's what we've been reporting on for years, that all of this stuff is like a template. There's no creativity. These people cannot think their way out of anything. And the whole point is, once you see through this, it doesn't matter whether it's Extinction Rebellion, whether it's change agents in your local area implementing Agenda 21, or whether it's your local council meeting using so-called Delphi technique to control the meeting. Once you see this for what it is, you can't unsee it. It's absolutely blatantly obvious, and it's so obvious that you would not believe that people would be taken in by it. But it is genius in its simplicity, because they never deviate from basically these sort of strategic points that they have. And you've seen it at these council meetings. You know, I said
they always come back with a strategic point.
And there's never an argument. And that's the point. So it is quite easy to counter this stuff, and that to me where the fun is. That's where the fun is, because these people are just like programmed drones. And I'm not being kind of sort of arch about this. I mean it in the respect that they can't think their way out of anything. So it's very easy to expose this stuff. In fact, there was a Delphi technique meeting in Sweden that went horribly wrong, where the locals were basically booing at people, these local officials, to leave the room. Now, that is really where all this is going to go, because it can't really stand up to any scrutiny. And that, I think, is where the fun is, because you have to have some fun with this, because if you looked at it, it's so depressing and bleak that you would think, no, it's not going to be worth living in 10 years' time. Well, that's okay, because Greta Thunberg and the rest of the kids are going to save the world in 12 years. So if I can survive 12 years, then everything's going to be all right again. I mean, this is the lunacy of it all, isn't it? I mean, who would have thought that would work? You've got this 16-year-old kid who's basically mentally disabled, who's being used to push something.
It's terrible, actually.
Well, it is. I mean, it's abuse. It's very sad, but
it is.
It's, when you look at it, the people who are implementing this are only dealing with the kind of mentality which they believe is prevalent. So if they thought people were cleverer, then they would use different tactics. But they must believe that the public are stupid to do this. They must believe that. And in a way, they're right, because in this country especially, we're so controlled by the media. Like this nonsense that gets put out in the idiotic papers like The Guardian. Every day there's some mentally helpless, deranged bloody piece about climate change, which has got nothing to do with anything of any fact. But they keep doing it. It's like relentless. It's the relentless nature of it that is so absurd to me.
Yeah,
repeat.
Yeah, but I mean,
people will believe.
Yes, but he was talking about propaganda in general. But the thing is that the people like Edward Bernays and all these social engineers. Well, look at we were talking earlier about Huxley, and Bertrand Russell. These were just intellectuals who basically knew where things were going. But it all came out of social Darwinism. Yeah. So basically, if you look, it doesn't matter if you're looking at these idiots in the Labour Party trying to unseat your brother, or these people implementing this. They're all social Darwinists. They believe that in some way that they are the fittest and they're going to survive. Well, as Charles Fort says, survival of the fittest doesn't really work because stupidity and ignorance survive everywhere. So how can and unfit people are all over the place. So how can you say the fittest survive? Because it doesn't make any sense, So
there's more gyms around London than there's ever been before.
Well, that's right, but a lot of the people who go to gyms are mentally unstable, in my opinion. Because if you want to do that, run on the spot and sweat yourself to stupidity.
Be careful about that one.
Well, I've been myself, but it just puts me off the sort of people who go there, because they all seem to be very narcissistic. My idea of sort of getting out in nature is to run around getting dirty and that sort of thing. Basically, getting a bit of mud on your shoes, that sort of thing, and coming back feeling, I've been out,
Yes.
Rant over.
Okay. I want to end with 4 points later. When are we going to end, anyway?
Well, quite soon, I think.
All right. Do you want me to go to these 4 points, or
I think you should.
got more something to say? Hello?
Hello?
Oh, you're still there? Yeah, I'm going to make four late points that came from the earlier, or if you got more to say, Sandy.
Sorry I was boring you.
No, I think I've just, I'm thinking about this whole, the whole propaganda thing, just briefly.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's as though, throughout history, we've always had somebody that's wanted to sort of like take over the world, be it sort of, I don't know, Hitler or whoever. Or some sort of dictator,
Stalin,
but they were always very
Caesar,
honest about
Alexander
what they were going to do. Yeah, exactly. They were always quite honest. They wanted to dominate, and they were quite honest about it. But the trouble is with this is that you've got this covert, aggressive plan for world control, and the targeted victims are actually pulling in the Trojan horse for their own sort of destruction and welcoming it and celebrating it and paying for it and everything. And, anybody opposing this plan is a direct threat to humanity. So you're some dreadful charlatan who doesn't want to save the planet. And it is absolute genius, really, because there's not a shot being fired. And it's been done so covertly and so through propaganda and mind control of the public that it's genius in some ways.
Cleverer than eugenics.
If people were only to see to see what was going on. I mean, it's just you've just tear up 800 years of constitutional rights and freedoms to save the planet.
Well, people have to be receptive to their own subversion. You can't subvert people who don't want to be subverted. That's a fact. So if people were sovereign-minded and able to think for themselves, it would never happen. So people have got to examine what they've been told and what they are. Because if they accept this, then really they will accept anything.
Yeah. All right. That brings me to my 4 points then.
Marvellous.
4 points. Well, consciousness is what is needed, isn't it, Mark? Which is what you were just saying. Well, 4 points arising from previous and what you're saying. A lot of people are asking about the second referendum. Will it happen or not?
Oh, yeah. Brexit.
Sorry to go back, but since it is, this is the week of changing the United Kingdom or not against its own wishes. I don't actually think any second referendum will happen, apart from the fact it's a complete travesty of democracy even to consider it. But I think if it did take place, the result would be a total defeat for Remain. because people have seen what the European Union gets up to. And this time, if there was a second referendum, people would actually go into a lot more about what the EU is actually about, and there would be massive defeat for them. So I don't think they want a second referendum. It's talked about, though, in order to force people into a Brexit in name only. That, I think, is their agenda. So I'll repeat again. Anyone get hold of your MP or someone else's MP, doesn't matter, and say, we want to leave now and talk later. Leave on the 29th and talk later. So that's my first and second point. Right, my third point is about climate and the weather. We had a good chat earlier on, and I want to report on Weather Action, some very recent results. Namely, there were two big storms that hit Australia. Very soon. They're hitting now, or just to finish hitting. Now, those two storms formed in one of our, what we call our top red R5, meaning red 5 solar weather enhancement periods, where the solar wind interacts more with the Earth, and there's been big events on the Sun. Now, so the origin of those two storms is these solar events, nothing to do with CO2. Now, as far as I can see from what we've checked out, all big storms originate in our R5 or R4 periods. Now, this is a big success, and these particular storms in Australia look as if it means we will be able to predict now, without as much data as for other continents, weather futures in Australia, i.e. long-range forecasting in Australia, and in principle in any other country. So anyone who's interested in this, go on our website. Of course, it needs money, and we need support for these things, so I'm urging you obviously to go there and buy our forecasts. And if you're interested in developing weather forecasting long range in other countries, say which country you're interested in, and we will, put you on a list and involve you in stuff for that, especially when we collect money to help the research. And the last point, of course, apart from collecting money for Weather Action research, we need money for Windows on the World, and I think Mark will come in now at that point, but there's a donate button on the site, and we need more, do we not, Mark?
Well, thanks for mentioning that, Piers, because I wasn't actually going to mention it. I sometimes say, yes, if you can help us out going from place to place and keeping the thing going, do press the donate button and chuck a few coins into the account there. It's all very, very helpful. And yes, it is a lot of work doing this, and I do enjoy it. But one day it would be great, wouldn't it, if we were actually rewarded for our efforts, like these idiots who spout this crap all day we have to report on, I mean, if we could even get hundredths of their salary, then imagine what we could do, We could change the world.
What do they pay? My God,
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the whole point. There is a good point to that, though, I think, really, in that mediocrity is rewarded, but insightful, cutting-edge truth is not, and that is the post-truth world. So anybody out there who wants to book our talks, The Bigger Picture, please do look on the website for that. And we'll be back next week live again, 9 p.m. on a Sunday. I'm very pleased that we had a lot of people listening tonight.
Give the website address.
I only put out this thing this afternoon, and it was just a little short audio note to say that we're back doing live shows, because I've been pre-recording shows for the past 2 months and putting them out from hotel rooms or wherever I am, or wherever I was at the time. And now we're back at Windows Towers in London. So, yes, we're going to be live every Sunday at windowsontheworld.net.
Okay.
Go to the live
and
page.
weatheraction.com for the forecasts and those other contributions.
Correct. So, if you can help us out, please do. If you want to book us, please do. And we'll be back next week at 9 p.m. See you all soon on Windows on the World.